As a kid growing up, I loved watching the Alien movies, especially Alien and Aliens. These two movies were both masterpieces in my mind. However, the opening scene of Alien 3 sort of ruined the magic for me. Killing off Hicks anew at the start of the film was extremely off-putting. Whether you loved or hated the third film, it was just such a jarring opening. Going into the movie to realize the characters we connected with in the second film were just simply gone. However, years later, we are finally getting somewhat of a retcon to Alien 3 with Aliens Colonial Marines. Not only did the reveal trailer for this upcoming game look incredible, but it was from Gearbox, the makers of Brothers in Arms, and even some of the expansions to Half-Life. Plus, just look at the footage. It seemed to really capture the vibe of the Aliens universe. And not only did the game look amazing, but in fact Hicks was in the actual game. Even the actor Michael Biehn was coming back to voice and reprise his role of Hicks. Plus, the game was even going to feature Lance Henriksen. Not only did the game get the cast members from the original movies, it was also announced to be officially canon. Taking place between the events of Aliens and Aliens 3, we are finally going to see what happened to Hicks and why he's not dead in the cryo chamber at the start of Alien 3. I mean, how could any Alien fan pass this up? This was announced as officially canon and was going to expand upon the lore of the movies. The vibe looked great, the original cast is back, and it was coming from a big budget studio. What could possibly go wrong? Well, the game came out, and boy, after the release of it, we were left thinking, what did they actually do right? Now, before we take a deep dive into the heartache that was felt with the release of Aliens Colonial Marines, I would like to take a brief moment and welcome anyone new to the channel. If you are new, please consider subscribing. I got a ton of stuff in the works that I'd love to share with you all. Also, if you do happen to enjoy the video, let me know by dropping a like. But anyways guys, we got a lot to get into, so without further ado, let's get into it. So I've been disappointed with a game release before, but man, Alien Colonial Marines was just on an entire different level. How did this game turn out to be so terribly awful? For starters, let's talk about the plot and how Hicks was still alive. This was something that at first I was extremely excited about as a massive Aliens fan. I wanted to see an actual canon reason and get more story to Hicks. However, the way they kept him alive is so blah. So let's just get into it. So before Hicks went into cryo sleep at the end of Aliens, he sent out a distress call, which happened to be blocked by Weyland-Yutani and never actually was sent out. Hicks is later woken from cryo sleep and ends up in a firefight with Weyland-Yutani personnel, and during the firefight, a man that resembles Hicks falls into his cryo chamber. Long story short, the other man does happen to go into cryo sleep in the chamber by complete accident during the firefight, and the shuttle does take off with Ripley, Newt, and this other person. The other man does die in the crash, and that is the person that we see at the beginning of Alien 3. This is just so generic. They really did the old switcheroo trick. It's actually someone else's body. You know, I wouldn't complain so much, and I do know that this is basically nitpicking, but I mean, come on, this game was marketed as being canon, and yet the writing feels like complete fan fiction, generic fan fiction that you would just find on some random website. I mean, Michael Biehn's performance in this game was not even good. It's what I like to call what was phoned in, which is weird because overall he's a great actor. He was awesome in Aliens. He was awesome in Terminator and so many other movies. So what exactly happened here? But let's move aside from the story. Let's move aside from the voice act. What about the actual gameplay? How does it look and feel? Well, it looks and feels like nothing that was advertised. And this was not just a simple graphics downgrade. The AI was terrible. The controls were not good either. The game would constantly crash. It felt like this game was in early beta, but the game was advertised as being so much more. I mean, look at the aliens as they just run in place or run into walls. It's like they're completely brain dead. How did you advertise this game as being a canon follow-up to the movie Aliens, and yet you couldn't even actually nail the look and attitude and intelligence of the alien creatures? This was so bad that it actually led to a lawsuit filed against Sega and Gearbox. The gameplay was just nothing like what was advertised. In fact, there was even a whistleblower that claimed that Gearbox didn't even make the game, but instead outsourced it to Timegate Studios. Not only was the game supposedly allegedly outsourced, but there was also claims that Gearbox was stealing funds from Sega, and they used the funds that were meant to go into Aliens Colonial Marines and instead put it into the development into Borderlands 2 and Duke Nukem Forever. In fact, there was even talks that Sega was going to sue Gearbox. However, unfortunately, they were unable to. Gearbox did, after all, fulfill their part of the deal. Aliens did ship on multiple platforms. It did have co-op and competitive game modes, and it did function. I mean, it functioned poorly, but fans could still boot it up and play it. Overall, Gearbox delivered what Sega asked for. It didn't matter that it was a hot mess, and it didn't matter all the false marketing. It shipped to the fans on the platforms that Sega required and the game modes that Sega paid for. Sega could have took Gearbox to court because of the alleged stolen funds. However, there's no actual proof of this, and it was just a whistleblower, so we will never know what actually happened here. But it is obvious that either there was a severe lack of management for this game, or Gearbox did in fact put the money into other games development, because this game does not play like that development cost that was upfronted for it. Sega should have kept a better eye on the development of this title, especially since this was such a large IP. That could have been ended up being truly amazing for fans. This could have been something that Aliens fans would talk about for years. Instead, most people forgot all about this game's existence, unless they begin to think of some of the most disappointing games of all time. In the end, fans are the ones that really lost with this title. Gearbox, whether they produced this game or outsourced it, whoever developed it clearly missed the mark. And Sega allowed the game to be released even though it was a complete train wreck. The fans were the ones left with all the hype generated from the marketing only to be delivered with this awful game. Plus, we don't even get the silver lining that if Gearbox did in fact steal funds to make a new Duke Nukem game, they dropped the ball with that too, because Duke Nukem Forever turned out to be a total dud. So we don't even get the benefit of seeing that IP return from this mess. However, with all of that said, there is still a group of small people that actually enjoyed Aliens Colonial Marines. In fact, modders once again stepped up to the plate and improved the game. So if you do happen to want to check this game out, I would highly recommend playing it with the Aliens Colonial Marines overhaul mod. It's just crazy how modders come through for us time and time again and are the ones and the backbone of the gaming industry. Overall, this game could have been something truly special, but instead this is one game that was surrounded by all the things that I personally hate with giant gaming publishers. It had the lies, the deception, the false promises, and just flat out blatant greed, with companies trying to get as much money or release a broken product to get a return on their investment. But I want to hear what you all think. Do you remember being hyped for this title? Did you actually enjoy the game despite all of its flaws? What other games got you hyped only to come out to disappoint you? Let me know in the comments down below. As for me, I got a ton of work to do, so I'm gonna get back to the grind and I'll catch you all next time. Peace.